in this great COVID year. That's my addition to our comments. Are you recording now, Chase?
Yes, sir.
Good, thank you. This meeting is being held virtually via web conference. The meeting includes a public dial-in option that's available on the Charter Commission's website. Today, our Director of External Affairs, Chase Engle, welcome. Glad you're here. And let me also thank Judy Spencer for all the work that she's done for us in 2020. We'll be handling the roll call and votes for the Commission. I also would like to introduce Ashley Thomas, who is our Commission General Counsel. And Ashley, would you please reference the circumstances behind the virtual meeting and the relevant TCA section?
Thank you, Chairman. This is Ashley Thomas. Given the current COVID-19 pandemic and concerns for public safety and welfare, as well as the pandemic's impact on the Commission's budget, this Commission meeting is being conducted by electronic means as provided by TCA 8-44-108 and Governor Lee's Executive Order 65. Additionally, Executive Order 65 requires those speaking to identify themselves in a manner capable of permitting the public to ascertain the identity of the person speaking. This meeting is being recorded and will be available after its conclusion via link on the Commission's website. A call-in number was provided on the Commission's website for the public to participate.
So I'm the first violator of what you just said. This is Tom Griscom. So thank you, Ashley. As a reminder, all votes of the Commission are conducted via taking a roll call. And please identify yourself, as I just did, prior to speaking, making a motion, or voting. So with that, Chase, may I ask you to take a roll call of the Commission?
Yeah, Chase Engle here. Commissioner Hanson?
Present.
Is present. Commissioner Levine? Is present. Commissioner Patterson?
Here.
Is present. Commissioner Richards?
Here.
Is present. Commissioner Cisnet? Is present. Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Is present. Commissioner Tucker?
Here.
Is present. And Chairman Griscom?
Here.
Is present. Chairman, there are 8 members present.
It's Tom Griscom again. Thank you, Chase. Today's agenda includes Commission action on key policies. We'll hear several policies on first reading from our Rules and Policy Committee, as well as the Public Records Rule on final reading. We will also receive an update on the fiscal year 2021 budget, and we have 2 charter agreements for approval. We'll conclude our meeting with 2 training sessions for commissioners to further education and knowledge about the work that we are embarking on. All of you were sent the agenda in advance of the meeting. Does anyone have any comments to make regarding the agenda before we vote to approve? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
This is Eddie Smith. I'll give a motion.
Thank you, Commissioner. I have a second.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, Chase, may I ask you to take a roll call?
Chase Engle. Commissioner Hanson?
Aye.
Votes aye. Commissioner Levine? Votes aye. Commissioner Patterson? Votes aye. Commissioner Richards?
Aye.
Votes aye. Commissioner Cisnet?
Aye.
Votes aye. Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Votes aye. Commissioner Tucker?
Aye.
Votes aye. Chairman Griscom?
Aye.
Votes aye. Chairman, 8 members voted aye.
Thank you, Chase. This is Tom Griscom again. The minutes of the meeting held on October 28, 2020 have been provided. Does anyone have edits to those minutes? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve the minutes for October 28, 2020? Thank you, Commissioner. Do I have a second?
This is Commissioner Patterson, second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Chase, may I ask you to call the roll, please?
Single here. Commissioner Hanson?
Aye.
Votes aye. Commissioner Levine? Votes aye. Commissioner Patterson? Commissioner Richards?
Aye.
Votes aye. Commissioner Cisnet?
Aye.
Votes aye. Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Votes aye. Commissioner Tucker? Votes aye. Chairman Griscom?
Aye.
Votes aye. Mr. Chairman, 8 members voting aye.
Thank you. This is Tom Griscom again. In accordance with Commission Policy 1.200, we've reserved time for up to 30 minutes of public comment. Chase, can you please introduce any individuals who've registered for public comment?
Mr. Chairman, at this point in time, no one is registered for public comment.
Thank you. Appreciate that. This is Tom Griscom again. I want to make two quick points. I want to thank both Commissioner Levine and Commissioner Richards for their work as part of the SCORE report that was put out last week. The section in there on charter schools, I know it was sent to all commissioners. I hope you will find time to read it. I think it was very well done and very points a clear direction, I think, as we start moving forward as an actual acting commission going forward. I also would like to recognize and thank Commissioner Patterson for his work on the report that came out from the Department of Education that looks at our schools that have been in the ASD area and the actions going forward with this report that will go to the legislature in early January. So to the three of you all, I just want to recognize publicly and on the record for your good work, and thank you for doing that. So now, the first item on our agenda today is a report from the Rules and Policy Committee. Terrence, thank you for leading this committee. I understand we have some items for approval on first reading today.
Commissioner Terrence Patterson, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to thank Ashley and Tess for their continued work to ensure that the Commission is in the correct posture as we take on our new responsibilities around charter school appeals and authorization. As we look into 2021, this has been quite a long road and a lot of hard work and time has gone into this. So welcome aboard, Ashley and Tess. Thanks for your continued diligence. So now I'd like to ask Tess to walk the Commission through the policies that we discussed in the Rules and Policy Committee for their first reading today.
Thank you, Commissioner Patterson. The first policy that we have before the Commission on first reading is proposed changes to Commission Policy 1.100, the Commission Members Policy. The change here simply inserts and updates the Commission's new address in the Davy Crockett Tower as it relates to the conflict of interest disclosure that Commissioners are required to complete. That is the totality of the changes before you on first reading, and I'm happy to turn this back over to Commissioner Patterson.
So this is Tom Griscom. I'm going to pick up this piece, Tess. So thank you for that report. Are there any comments? Seeing none, we're now ready for a vote on policy 1.100 concerning commission members. Do we have a motion to approve the changes to policy 1.100 on first reading?
Eddie Smith, I'll make the
So
motion.
moved.
Have a second. Levine.
And that was, if it was Commissioner Smith's motion, then I second.
So we will record Commissioner Smith as making the motion and Commissioner Cisnet as doing the second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Chase, would you please take the roll call?
Yeah, Chase Ingle here. Commissioner Hanson?
Aye.
Votes aye. Commissioner Levine? Votes aye. Commissioner Patterson? Votes aye. Commissioner Richards?
Aye.
Votes aye. Commissioner Cisnet? Votes aye. Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Votes aye. Commissioner Tucker?
Aye.
Votes aye. And Chairman Griscom? Votes aye. Mr. Chairman, 8 members voting aye.
Thank you. This is Tom Griscom again. I'd like to recognize Terrence once more to introduce the next item on the Rules and Policy Committee report. Terrence, let me turn to you again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. This is Terrence Patterson. And at the Rules and Policy Committee last week, the committee also considered the adoption of the first set of our LEA policies for the commission that will govern the commission's work as an LEA and a school district of its authorized charter schools. And so I'd like for Tess to provide an overview of the LEA policies for the commission. Tess.
This is Tess Stovall. This will be a longer presentation than the previous one. So I want to set the stage for commissioners as we start looking at these LEA policies as to the context in which these were developed and why we have to have these policies in place. So pursuant to Tennessee Code Annotated 4913-105, the Charter Commission serves as the LEA for any public charter school that it authorized. And there are many places in federal and state law and state board rule and policy which say an LEA shall adopt a policy that says something, X, Y, and Z. And so in order to maintain compliance with these statutes, rules, policies, the Commission must adopt a set of LEA policies that fulfill these obligations. Important to note that these policies only apply to the authorized charter schools under the Commission, so they do not impact any other charter school. And there will be a set of procedures that the Commission will adopt to align to some of these policies that will provide in further detail how these policies will be implemented. And these procedures will be drafted after the policies are adopted. So in crafting these policies, we first looked at the state board's current LEA policies as the basis, as well as looking at what other school districts in Tennessee have adopted. If you go to any district within Tennessee, you're going to see very similar policies for all school districts. But I think it's important to note that we do take a unique angle on these LEA policies in order to maintain maximum autonomy for our charter schools. So for the most part, the staff's approach at these policies is to develop a policy that minimally aligns with statute, but then leaves autonomy to our charter schools to develop a fuller, more robust policy based on their school context, as long as it aligns to our policies and to state law. So charter schools authorized by the Commission are required to adopt policies and procedures that align to these LEA policies. And the Commission staff will regularly audit these policies for compliance. And this is important because, number one, we need to be prepared and to ensure that these policies are being implemented by our charter schools. If there's any monitoring that the Tennessee Department of Education might do in the future where it asks a charter school to produce a policy, we want to ensure that they would have that on hand. As well as there are regular times that we as a school district are required to submit a policy on a certain topic. And so we as a school district have to be able to submit both our policy as well as how our charter schools are implementing that policy. So the first set of policies in front of you all today is the first batch of policies. The second and remaining batch of policies will come to the Commission on first reading in February. So at least annually, the staff will be auditing these policies to ensure alignment to any changes in state law, state board rules, state board policy. So it will be very normal for, at least on an annual basis, for you all to be seeing updates to these LEA policies. So the policies up for approval on first reading today were reviewed by the Rules and Policy Committee. And there were a few edits made to 2 policies based on feedback from the committee that I will highlight for you as I'm walking through. Because there are so many policies up for approval today, I'm going to give a brief summary of what these policies are and then happy to take any questions the Commission might have. So the first set of policies here is in the 1000 series, which is board operations. So these policies require that the charter school and the commission adopt policies in compliance with federal and state law, that a charter school adopt a code of ethics and conflict of interest policy, that a charter school adopt a grievance and complaint policy, but this policy does state that the first avenue for most complaints is going to be the authorized charter school's governing board and not the commission. However, we do outline in this policy that there are certain complaints that could come to the commission first, and that it outlines a procedure by which the commission and commission staff would handle those complaints. A charter school has to adopt a policy on public records in compliance with state law. The commission will adopt a procedure around record retention, specifically as it relates to its LEA functions and maintenance of federal grant records, student records, et cetera, and the charter schools have to align their procedures with the commission's adopted record retention. Charter schools have to adopt a calendar in compliance with state law, but they do handle their own determinations around inclement weather closing, particularly because our charter schools are located in multiple locations in the state, and they are just required to let the commission know whatever they may close. A charter school shall implement a special education policy that's in compliance with federal and state law. We did make an update to this policy between the Rules and Policy Committee based on feedback from Commissioner Tucker in committee. A charter school has to implement policies in alignment with the American Disabilities Act and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. You'll see in this policy that the commission will need to establish an ADA and 504 coordinator. This is required by federal and state law, and that the charter schools also have to establish a coordinator as well. This policy did receive some changes between the committee meeting and this meeting today, based on some references that we noted that were referring to the state board when we needed to update them to refer to the commission. The charter school shall remain smoke-free and post all required signage. The charter school shall prohibit sex offenders from being on campus. And then the last policy in this series is that the charter school shall maintain autonomy. The commission shall maintain autonomy as it relates to our charter schools and really designates how the commission will communicate with the school's designee as it relates to implementation of these policies. So the next set of policies in front of you all today come from the 4000 series around instruction. So these really just lay out what are current requirements for all public schools in state law and state board rule, and that they do apply to the work of our authorized charter schools. So first, a charter school shall provide homebound services to students as required by statute and state board rule. The charter school shall identify and serve English learners in compliance with federal and state law and state board rule and policy. The charter schools students in charter schools may access statewide course access programs, and that the charter school has to develop a procedure to handle any denials of participation in those programs, and that charter school shall provide credit recovery options to students in compliance with state law and state board rule. And then the final set of policies before you all today is around the 5000 series and personnel. The first policy here reiterates the fact that charter school employees are non-employees of the commission, and so it's important for each school to develop policies around personnel rights and responsibilities in alignment with federal and state law. However, charter schools are required to ensure that employees meet the minimum requirements for employment under statute, and that they are required to report any licensed employee misconduct to the State Board of Education, which is required by state law. Charter schools have to maintain personnel records in accordance with federal and state law. They have to conduct background investigations of their employees and maintain and dispose those records in compliance with federal and state law. Charter schools have to ensure a healthy and safe environment for their employees and ensure that they have policies as it relates to employee health and safety. Charter schools have to ensure that all employees maintain appropriate relations with students. If they are using substitute teachers, they have to be hired in compliance with state law. And charter schools have to submit a salary schedule or strategic compensation plan to the commission to ensure we are maintaining our compliance with state law around compensation plans. So this concludes my presentation on the first set of LEA policies for the Commission, which are proposed today on first reading, and I'm happy to take any questions at this point.
Thank you, Tess. I don't see questions from commissioners, so I think we are ready to move to a vote on the LEA policies under 1,000 series board operations, 4,000 series instructional support, and 5,000 series on personnel. Do we have a motion to approve these LEA policies on first reading?
Mr. Chairman, one quick question. Do we need to specify which rules we're approving on this vote by their number, or are we good just to give it that generic since it's in the agenda? Just wanting to make sure that we do all this right, just so since it is the rules and policies.
Thank you. Let me ask Ashley. I would assume, since it's in our items that were sent out, that would be appropriate for somebody who wanted to see exactly what we did. Am I correct, or do we need to do it a different way?
That's correct, Chairman. You can do a vote of the collective policies that Tess went over.
Thank you, Ashley. Commissioner Smith, does that answer your question?
It does, and with that, I'll make the motion of everything you just said that we approve that.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Commissioner Terrence Patterson, second.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Chase, may I ask you to call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. This is Chase Engel. Commissioner Hanson?
Aye.
Votes aye. Commissioner Levin?
Aye.
Commissioner Patterson?
Aye.
Votes aye. Commissioner Richards?
Aye.
Votes aye. Commissioner Cisnet? Votes aye. Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Votes aye. Commissioner Tucker?
Aye.
Votes aye. Chairman Griscom? Votes aye. Mr. Chairman, 8 members voting aye.
Thank you. This is Tom Griscom again. So, Commissioner Patterson, I believe you have one other item for us to consider today. Let me turn this report back over to you.
Thank you. This is Commissioner Patterson. So, Chairman, we do have one final item, and that is to consider and vote on our public records request rule. And I'd like to ask Ashley to walk us through this proposed rule.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Commissioner Patterson. This is Ashley Thomas. The rules on final reading detail the procedures for public records requests that are received by the Commission. Just briefly, any Tennessee citizen may make a request for public records. That request will be received by myself as the Public Records Request Coordinator and Executive Director Stovall as the records custodian for response on behalf of the Commission. The rules indicate that the Commission has 7 days to respond to the request by either providing the records, denying the request, or indicating that more time is needed for a response. All records will be reviewed and, where necessary, redacted prior to response. In September 2020, the Commission conducted a rulemaking hearing and there was no public comment received. Upon this final reading and approval by the Commission, I will submit these rules to the Attorney General's office for signature and file them with the Secretary of State. The rules will then be scheduled to become effective 90 days after filing, with a review before the Government Operations Committee approximately 1 month before the effective date. I can answer any questions that you all have, but I think that these are ready for final approval.
Ashley, thank you for that presentation. Are there any questions? Seeing none, may I ask for a motion to approve?
This is Levine, so moved.
Thank you, Commissioner. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any additional comments? Seeing none, Chase, may I ask you to call the roll, please?
Chase Engel and Commissioner Hanson?
Aye.
Votes aye. Commissioner Levine? Votes aye. Commissioner Patterson?
Aye.
Votes aye. Commissioner Richards? Commissioner Sisnett?
Aye.
Votes aye. Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Votes aye. Commissioner Tucker?
Aye.
Votes aye. Chairman Griscom? Votes aye. Commissioner Richards, are you on right now? All right. Well, Chairman Griscom, there are 7 out of 8 members voting aye.
Thank you, Chase. This is Tom Griscom, so we're going to move to our next item on our agenda. Is a report of the Business Operations Committee. We'll review the fiscal year 2021 budget to actuals for the Charter Commission. I'd like to ask Tess to walk us through the Commission through this report.
Thank you. This is Tess Stovall. At the Business Operations Committee meeting on December the 8th, I gave a detailed presentation on the FY21 budget to actuals report. This report was provided to the Commission as a part of the meeting materials, and I want to highlight some of the key points from this report for the full Commission. The Commission itself stands in a strong budget position when we're looking at actuals as well as the forecast for the remainder of the fiscal year, currently projecting to come in below budget. The implementation of the FY21 budget for the Commission is a learning opportunity, both for staff and the Commission, to inform better budgeting moving forward. So we, as a staff, are learning how different expenditures are coded by the state accounting system, as well as some expenditures that we need to budget for in the future. This will allow the Commission staff, particularly looking at our FY22 budget, to build a budget that really better aligns with kind of where the expenditures are coming in, such that we're able to compare year over year in a much more efficient way. So much of the projected cost savings in this budget is coming from both not hiring the full 10 staff members that the Commission is authorized to hire in fiscal year 21, as well as the continued impact of the pandemic as it relates to travel and meeting costs. The one item that I did want to highlight for the full Commission is the line item around state agency professional services. So this was previously an unbudgeted line item, but as you can see, we have actual expenditures in this line item, and we've continued to forecast expenditures here. This is due to 2 main reasons. First is that different state agencies charge other state agencies for basic services such as accounting services, payroll services, telephone services, and this is just simply not accounted for in the budget. And secondly, we have several items that we had budgeted for in other areas, which are actually were being charged under the state agency professional services line item. So a great example of this is laptops and technology. So my laptop and technology were actually charged by the state's accounting system under state agency professional services as opposed to computers and technology, which we had previously budgeted for in a different line item. We're going to continue to watch expenditures, particularly hitting this line item, to both be able to update the forecast for FY21 for the remainder of this fiscal year, as well as when we are revising the approved FY22 budget, to be better able to capture expenditures that are coming into this particular line item. This concludes my overall presentation on the FY21 budget to actuals at this point in time, and I'm happy to take any questions.
So this is Tom Griscom. Let me ask Commissioner Smith and Sisnett if they have any comments that they want to make on the presentation that Tess just provided to us.
For the first time, no.
No, I don't either. Thanks.
Thank you all. All right. This is just a reporting item, does not require any further action by the Commission. So our next part of the agenda is for 2 charter agreements for approval. The charter agreements up for consideration are Nashville Collegiate Prep School, which will serve kindergarten through 8th grade, located in Nashville, and Cornerstone Prep School, which will serve kindergarten through 5th grade, located in Memphis. Ashley, can you give us an overview of the agreements, please?
Yes, Chairman. This is Ashley Thomas. As Chairman Griscom said, the charter agreements before the Commission today are for Nashville Collegiate Prep and Cornerstone Prep School. The charter agreements are in the shared drive for the Commission if you all would like to review them in detail. Prior to today's submission to the Commission, I want to say that Executive Director Stovall and I have been in discussion and negotiation with both schools. We've engaged in multiple conversations, discussed timelines, pre-opening checklists, and waivers with both schools prior to today. By way of information, these agreements continue to be living documents throughout the term of the charter, so I don't want the Commission to think that this is a document that's just going to be signed and not reviewed periodically. There may be changes in statute or Commission rule that will affect the charter agreements. Additionally, there may be changes to the charter school's operations that will require a review of the charter agreements. Most of the changes will be addressed by the Commission staff. There is language in both agreements that address details of the charter schools, such as food service and staffing, as well as boilerplate contract language, such as warranties and severability. For example, these charter schools have agreed not to contract with another nonprofit to manage the schools without written approval from the Commission. The agreements also indicate that several terms in the agreement are considered material, and those terms must be reported to the Commission and subject the agreement to amendment. Violation of those material terms can trigger a corrective action, or it subjects the charter schools to revocation. So now I would like to highlight for the Commission the terms of the agreement considered to be material. You will note that there are sections of the agreements that give deference to the Commission to determine if a change is material. Section 1.3 indicates that failure of the charter school to complete the pre-opening checklist is a material violation. The location of the charter school is a material term under Section 1.5 if the change in location is materially different from the location indicated in the charter application. There are threshold changes in student enrollment that are considered material under Section 2.1. This section also indicates that a reduction in enrollment of more than 15% must be reported to the Commission for determination if that reduction is material. This section also indicates that reduction in enrollment for successive years or changes that affect the financial solvency of the school are considered to be material. Section 2.2 states that changes to a charter school's academic program must be reported to the Commission for determination if that change is material. Section 6 of the charter agreement discusses transportation. A change in a charter school's decision whether to provide transportation is material. However, if that school has decided to provide transportation, a modification in that plan is not material. And then the final section I want to bring to the Commission's attention is that a charter school's failure to complete and submit its annual audit is a material violation under 9.6. As I stated earlier, material changes would be something that we would bring back to the Commission for discussion to determine if an amendment needs to be made or if there's other corrective action that the Commission would like to see the charter schools engage in. The sections that I highlighted, they focus on material terms. Tess, unless there's anything else you would like for me to speak to, I can try to address any questions about these agreements that the Commission may have before voting on each one individually.
So this is Tom Griscom. Tess, do you have anything to add to Ashley's presentation? Okay. Let me ask commissioners, are there questions about these two applications?
I have a quick question, hopefully quick. Could you just walk me through, I looked at the indemnification on special ed piece, and you guys could just walk me through A, like what that would mean, and B, is that the typical contract that we're seeing in charter schools related to students with disabilities and issues that arise?
The indemnification is sort of boilerplate. It is in compliance with federal and state law. That is something that I've seen in most charter agreements. Tess, if you've seen anything different, you can, I guess, chime in now.
I would concur with that. That's pretty, I think too, when we were developing this charter agreement, we looked at what other authorizers in the state had as it relates to all points, as well as what NACSA kind of nationally would say in terms of best practice. So I think that it's pretty standard language.
Mr. Tucker, does that answer your question, or do you have a follow-up?
No, it does answer my question. And the other question I had was, shockingly, I know, around the special ed piece generally. And I just want to say, as a state board member, when the state board was authorizing these schools, Tess and her team were amazing at this issue. So this isn't I'm not raising these questions because I have concerns about how it'll be handled. I just want to make sure I understand it. And one of the things I'm confused about that I want to make sure that we're clear with our schools with is the ultimate authority for special ed in our charters. I know that under the law, the LEA, they're part of the LEA, right? But then the statute seems to say that charters are responsible for special ed. So I'm just trying to figure out where that line is for who is the ultimate authority under these contracts and in accordance with the law here for ensuring that kids with disabilities receive what they're entitled to under law. Maybe a longer conversation. I don't know.
No, and this is so well, happy to explain. And again, I think this is a nuanced area as it relates to authorizers being the LEA and charter schools not being the LEA. So I'll happily explain like an example that this might be helpful in terms of, so for example, every year the Tennessee Department of Education has IEP compliance monitoring of districts. So we as a state board district were told here are the IEPs that will be monitored. We then say to the charter schools, here are your IEPs there. You're responsible for, ensuring that the IEPs were up to date, signatures, et cetera. Now, we had staff kind of auditing that process, supporting them along the way. We, of course, were not in the school helping them to get the monitoring done or the auditing done. Certainly, we were supporting them in that, and we were letting them know this is going to be an issue that's going to come up in terms of when we have to turn in our IEP monitoring. But ultimately, it was the state board as a district that was held to the audit of the findings of the audit, whatever they may be. So then we in turn would say to the charter school, here are the audit findings. You are now responsible for correcting these audit findings if there were any. And so we ultimately, as the LEA, are responsible and are providing the oversight, but we are then kind of deferring and kind of supporting the charter school in correcting those findings, ensuring that there's proper oversight. We did have at the state board a special populations coordinator who had monthly calls and does continue to have monthly calls with our schools around special populations generally, ensuring they're in compliance, answering questions, troubleshooting as we can. And certainly as we're thinking about staffing for the commission, planning to have that same, kind of coordinator role as well. We as the district have, hold all of the IEPs and the Easy IEP system. So we have very easy access and are continuing to monitor as it relates to compliance when it comes to IEPs. That's something that the site visit also looks into, is like, let's pull a sample service schedule. Let's see what this looks like on the ground. Because ultimately we know as an LEA, we have responsibility there, but we also recognize the autonomy and the flexibility as it comes to implementation. So it is kind of dancing that fine line. Does that answer your question? It does. I think I would just encourage you and the staff as our portfolio of schools grows to be looking carefully at this language and how it plays out. And just as an example, I will say during COVID, for charters that were part of other LEAs, not ours, there were real conflicts when the LEA was making, especially in the spring, when an LEA was making decisions about not having, schools that count, like having only optional educational opportunities in the late spring, and charters that were part of that LEA wanted to actually continue school. And because there was real confusion over who was
had authority over kids with disabilities, the district was saying we're not going to have IEP meetings, which were necessary to be able to move forward. And the charters were in a really complicated situation because the district was technically responsible, but they wanted to have that autonomy and actually serve the kids. And so I just want to make sure that our district isn't having those challenges because the kids are the ones who actually, suffered at that. So it's a weird legal tightrope. So just making sure that our language is as clear and that our messaging is as clear as possible so that kids with disabilities aren't kind of stuck in the middle with everybody pointing the finger at that's their problem, and they don't get served well. So that's my speech. It's a national problem. I'm dealing with it in other states in my day job. I just want to make sure we don't have that same problem if possible.
Thank you.
This is Tessa. I'll just completely agree, Commissioner Tucker, and I do think this is a continued messaging place because for our schools, because this is a place where there is a lot less autonomy than there are in other places. And so how do we as a commission, as an authorizer, really communicate this is why we actually are having to be a little bit more, quote unquote, over-regulatory. It's actually not us. It's the services to the students and the requirements around federal law. So completely hear you, and it's something that we are imminently focused on, and we look forward to continuing this conversation.
This is Tom Griscom. Ashley and Tess, thank you for your presentations, and Commissioner Tucker, thank you for your questions. We're going to vote on these separately, these two charter agreements. So,
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Commissioner, this is Commissioner Richards. I'm sorry,
yes.
I have moved from the telephone to the video and can now be heard and seen. I had two quick questions on these agreements.
Okay.
Number one, on the exhibit approved waivers, these appear to be identical for both of these. Tess, could you or Ashley help me understand, are these requested by the charters, and are these kind of the usual approved waivers? Because I find it interesting that they're identical.
Absolutely. So yes, those are the pretty standard approved or requested waivers. And also a lot of times when we go into these negotiations, we encourage our charter schools to request certain waivers because it helps with their operational efficiencies. So when we are looking at applications, a part of the application is the waiver application, and the ones that you see are pretty standard across all applications. Secondly, there is a process by which a charter school can apply for a waiver in the charter term. That's something that happens not all regularly, but something that's not surprising because a state law gets implemented or we identify an operational efficiency that we actually are encouraging them to apply for a waiver. But yes, it's pretty standard waiver language across most charter schools in the state.
Okay, thank you. My other question is there's an exhibit place for current approved performance frameworks. Are those supplied later, or what is the process for getting those done?
Sure. This is Tess Stovall. The commission at the October meeting approved the current approved performance framework. So those are in place, and that's what would be an exhibit to the current charter agreement. Okay. We do have terms in the agreement that if the performance framework has to be updated because of there's changes in the state's accountability system. So let's say there's a change in state law or an ESSA plan that would change how the state calculates its accountability, that we would be able to update our framework, and it would not require an amendment to the charter agreement. However, if there were other changes to the performance framework that the commission desired, it would require an amendment to the charter agreement.
Okay. Well, I just noted that in light of the authorizer evaluation, because the performance framework is a big part of that, and I'm curious as to how that's going to work together, particularly if we have to change the charter agreement in order to make a change in those, but we'll see how this all works.
This is Ashley Thomas, Commissioner Richards. And that kind of goes to my point at the beginning of this presentation that the charter agreement is a living document. As Tess said, as statutes or rules change, there may be something that we need to review in these agreements. And as staff, it's our responsibility to kind of review that and make sure the things that we can address before bringing to the commission that we do that. But ultimately, if we need to come to the commission for a decision, I wanted to highlight that we will do that as well.
Okay, thank you. That answers my questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there other questions? All right, so we are going to vote on these separately. The first one will be the Nashville Collegiate Prep. Is there a motion to approve the charter agreement for Nashville Collegiate Prep?
Wendy Tucker, I move that we approve the agreement.
Thank you, Commissioner. Do I have a second?
This is Christine Richards. I second.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, Chase, would you call the roll, please?
This is Chase Engel. Commissioner Hanson?
Aye.
Votes aye. Commissioner Levine?
Aye.
Votes aye. Commissioner Patterson? Votes aye. Commissioner Richards?
Aye.
Votes aye. Commissioner Sisnett? Commissioner Smith?
Yes.
Votes aye. Commissioner Tucker?
Aye.
Votes aye. Chairman Griscom?
Aye.
Votes aye. Mr. Chairman, you have 7 members voting aye.
Thank you.
I was muted. Aye.
Thank you.
8 of 8 voting aye.
Okay. Now we'll vote on Cornerstone Prep School. Do we have a motion to approve the charter agreement for Cornerstone Prep School?
I so moved.
Thank you, Commissioner. Do I have a second?
And a second.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, Chase, may I ask you to call the roll?
Commissioner Hanson?
Aye.
Votes aye. Commissioner Levine?
Aye.
Votes aye. Commissioner Patterson?
Aye.
Votes aye. Commissioner Richards? Votes aye. Commissioner Sisnett? Votes aye. Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Votes aye. Commissioner Tucker? Votes aye. Chairman Griscom?
Aye.
Votes aye. Mr. Chairman, you have 8 members voting aye.
Thank you. All right, this is Tom Griscom. Before we move into our training, I've got just a couple quick update items. Commissioners may recall that we briefly discussed a change in our committee structure that reflects more on us moving into this role of being authorizers for charter schools. I'm not asking today for any action because I would like for us to wait until we get our 9th commissioner. Tess and I both have had conversations with the administration, and I know they are working on identifying that 9th commissioner that will be from the middle part of the state. So if you would look at what has been shared, we have outlined the rules and policy that would also then pick up the governance work as well. Then the Business Operations Committee would essentially remain as it is. And then we're suggesting the creation of a School Performance and Accountability Committee. So, at our February 2021 meeting, we'll present these committee changes as governance procedures so that we can codify the structure, but also allows flexibility for us to make changes as we see our operations move forward in the structure that lines up with what we're trying to do. So just keep in mind, I wanted to update the commission members on this proposed new committee structure, the creation of this 3rd committee, which focuses on school performance and accountability, and moving governance into rules and policy where it feels like that would be a natural place for it to be continued. So more to come. If there's any questions or comments, I'll open it up for that right now, but this is more of just an update for commissioners so you have opportunity to look at what we're proposing and to think about it, and before we hopefully can act on this in February of next year. Any comments? Thank you. So we're now going to have our executive director update and renewal appeal timeline. So we've had a lot happening with the commission since October, so I'd like to ask Tess to share with us her update and give us an overview of renewal appeals timeline as well. Tess?
Thank you. This is Tess Stovall. I provided a written report to the commission as a part of your agenda materials. So I just wanted to, as a part of this oral report, highlight a few things for the record. So first, on the staffing front, as you all know and have met today and in previous meetings, we've hired 2 individuals to fill 2 key roles, Ashley Thomas in the General Counsel role, as well as Chase Engel in the Director of External Affairs role. I am currently conducting the hiring process for the Director of Finance and Operations. That person will support the Business Operations Committee as it relates to the Commission's budget, as well as oversee LEA functions for the Charter Commission. Once that individual is hired, they will focus on hiring 2 coordinator roles to support the LEA functions, and those individuals will report into the Finance and Operations role. As we previously discussed, as it relates to the fiscal year 22 budget request to increase the equity amount available for the Charter Commission, there are 3 positions that will be held to fill until fiscal year 22. The amount of available salary equity that the Commission has is something that I am keenly focused on, and it's critically important that the Commission be able to increase the equity available such that we're able to hire and retain staff competitively in the long term. When it comes to office space, we've officially assumed office space on the 5th floor. I am currently sitting in that office space, as is Chase, which is very exciting. And we will be slowly acquiring additional office space as we build out the staff of the Commission. We've also launched our official website and worked with General Services to establish a logo and branding documents for the Commission, which is just a huge step forward for us in terms of publicly identifying ourselves as a independent state agency. As Chairman Griscom has mentioned, we've been in regular conversations with the Governor's Office with regard to the appointment of the 9th member, and we'll be sure to update the Commission as we have further information. We have had a busy couple of weeks when it comes to our work with the Tennessee General Assembly. So the Charter Commission was in front of the Education, Health, and General Welfare Subcommittee of the Joint Operations Committee on November 17th for a sunset hearing. And then the Charter Commission will go in front of the full House Government Operations Committee as well as the Senate Government Operations Committee for additional sunset hearings when the General Assembly returns for the 112th General Assembly. We will absolutely let the full Commission know those dates as soon as we are given them. Last week, the Charter Commission presented at the Joint Government Operations Committee for rule review of our Charter School Appeals rule. And we received a positive recommendation from the committee on those rules, which is a great news, and it really establishes our work moving forward. I did share in the written report the ASD draft transition plan update. And so I just wanted to highlight for you some key points that as you're looking through that draft that you can kind of draw your attention to. As you know, Dr. Carney has previously presented to the Commission, this is going to continue to be a topic of conversation, and so I will plan to regularly update the full Commission as we have additional information as it relates to the formulation of the transition plan and any potential legislation as it relates to the ASD. So in accordance with statute, the Commissioner of Education must develop a transition plan for schools to exit the ASD no earlier than the 24-25 school year. And this plan has to be submitted by January the 1st to the General Assembly. So a draft transition plan was published by the Department of Education on December the 4th, and the department is currently accepting comments on that draft plan. So our summary of the draft plan is included in the materials, as I mentioned, but I wanted to highlight that the key components are that the ASD will work with each school under the jurisdiction of the ASD to develop a school exit plan based on one of the 5 options that are outlined in the draft framework and memo. It's important to note that the role of the Charter Commission remains to hear appeals of any denials of ASD schools' application to local districts, and any change in that role would require legislative changes. Also, the earliest the Commission would hear any appeals based on the current statutory language would be fall of 2023. Again, any changes to this timeline would have to come through changes in legislation from the General Assembly. And once the Department of Education has published that final draft and shared it with the General Assembly, I will ensure that the commissioners have it for their reference. And the last update that I wanted to provide for you all is just an overview of what renewal appeal timeline and process will look like should the Commission receive any renewal appeals in the spring. So first, there are 7 renewal applications that are currently being considered by Shelby County Schools and Metropolitan Nashville Public Schools. These local school districts have until February 1st of 2021 to vote on these renewal applications. And it's at that point that we would know, are there any schools that have been denied renewal that would be potentially appealing to the Charter Commission. So the Commission staff will know by early February if any appeals have been received by the Commission. So I wanted to provide you all just a brief overview of what that appeal process will look like, since this will be our first appeal that we'll be doing together. So we want to make sure that you have a full understanding of what the staff will be doing and what you will be asked to consider. So the governing board of an operator has 10 days from the decision to deny renewal to appeal that decision to the Commission. And in the rules that the Commission has previously passed, all requirements around that notice of appeal are contained in those rules. The Commission staff will notify the full Commission as well as the local Board of Education of the receipt of an appeal, and then it will begin its document collection. So it may collect additional information from the operator, the local Board of Education, as well as the Department of Education regarding that renewal decision. The Commission is required to assemble a review committee. And that will be made up of internal and external reviewers to review the record and the renewal application. We are in the process of identifying external reviewers now who could potentially serve on those review committees so that we are prepared to hear any appeal we might receive. We are first reaching out to the external reviewers who served on with the state board in appeals to see if there is interest in serving with the Commission. The review committee would also conduct an interview with the governing board of the school as a part of their process. The Commission staff will also schedule a public hearing in the local district where that charter school is located. At this public hearing that will be chaired by staff, the local Board of Education and the operator will have an opportunity to speak to the renewal appeal. We will also collect public comment. We will notify you of when that hearing is set. And we'll also ensure that you are able to see a recording of the hearing. There is no expectation that you attend the hearing. You are welcome to do so, but we will ensure that a recording of that hearing is available as a part of the record. So then the Commission staff is going to review the entire record of the appeal, and an executive director's findings and recommendation will be presented to the Commission. And the Commission standard of review in these types of appeals was the local Board of Education's decision to deny in the best interest of the students, the LEA, and in the community. So the Commission can either uphold the local board's decision to deny the renewal, and in that case, the local Board of Education would work with the charter school to wind down operations. It can also overturn the local board's decision to deny renewal. And in that case, if the local board and the operator do not decide to reconcile and let the school continue to be overseen by that local board of education, then the commissioner will be the authorizer of the charter school, and the commission will be in charge of signing a charter agreement with the governing board for a 10-year charter term. That concludes the overview of my update as the executive director, and I'm happy to take any questions at this point.
It's Tom Griscom. Questions for Tess?
Commissioner Richards, what would be the normal timeline for these matters to come before the commission where we would need to make a decision as far as the last step of the process?
Absolutely. So in state law, there is a 60-day timeline for the commission to vote on any renewal appeal.
So this is Tom Griscom again. So Tess, I think we're ready to move into our training portion. We've got 2 training sessions. One is a sample revocation appeal, and the other one is on authorizer evaluation. So let me turn to you now if you want to lead us through our training session.
Great, thank you. This is Tess Stovall. Chase, if I could ask you to switch the presenter to me so that I can upload and share my screen.
One second, I'm having some trouble getting this dot down to you. There. That should do it, Tess.
Fabulous. I was going to say, Judy, you are welcome to present this presentation for me if you want to.
I'll waive that right.
All right. Want to see that you all can see the presentation. Great. So I am really excited to present this first training for commissioners on a sample revocation appeal. So the context here is that the State Board of Education heard this revocation appeal in 2019. And beginning in January, revocation appeals responsibilities will transition to the commission. And so the purpose of this conversation is to ground you in what are some of the issues that you might be wrestling with as it relates to a revocation appeal, what a sample record might look like in an appeal, and kind of some of the ways that you might be thinking about your standard of review as it relates to revocation appeals. So I want to give you some background on this case study. As a part of your materials, you did receive the full record from the State Board of Education. You also had options to listen to the State Board's discussion on this appeal. So I am going to keep this presentation relatively high level and then save time for plenty of discussion at the end. So this school, Gateway University, was located in Memphis. It had opened in 2017-18. So by the time the appeal came to the State Board of Education, it was in its second year of operation. So when Shelby County voted to revoke the charter agreement, it was serving 9th and 10th grade. That revocation appeal was heard by the State Board of Education in April of 2019, and ultimately the State Board upheld Shelby County's decision to revoke the charter school. So today we're going to review what is the standard of review in revocations. We're going to talk about the appeal and kind of the facts in the case, and then we're going to leave time for discussion and questions from commissioners. So the statutory charge of the State Board as well as the commission in a revocation decision is, was the authorizer's decision to revoke contrary to Tennessee Code Annotated 4913-122? And there are 3 specific reasons that an authorizer can revoke a charter in statute. The first is if a charter school has committed a material violation of its charter agreement. The second, if it's failed to meet performance standard in its charter agreement. And third, if it's failed to meet generally accepted standards of fiscal management. So in this case, the charter agreement was revoked because of allegations as it relates to material violations to the charter agreement. So as we've discussed, this charter was young in its charter operating history. So first, it was approved by Shelby County in August of 2016. It opened in the 2017-18 school year. And just after the conclusion of the first school year, Shelby County had received a complaint from a former employee about allegations at the school. And so it started an investigation. It conducted an investigation, interviewed current and former employees, and completed its investigation in October of 2018. And it did give an opportunity for Gateway to respond to the investigation report. In December of 2018, the Shelby County notified Gateway that it would be moving to revoke its charter. Shelby County did hold a public hearing in January and ultimately decided to revoke the charter agreement in late January of 2019. So Shelby County cited 4 reasons for revoking the charter agreement and they stated these were material violations of the charter agreement. So first, that the school had a non-functioning governing board. Second, that grades were awarded in 2 classes that did not receive instruction. Third, that Gateway utilized unlicensed teachers. And fourth, that an employee did not clear a background check but was employed by the school. So Gateway submitted an appeal to the State Board of Education, and the State Board staff then started the initiation of the appeal process. So first, the State Board staff requested information from both the operator and the district, specifically as it relates to those 4 reasons that I outlined on the previous slide. We scheduled a public hearing and held the public hearing in Memphis, where the school district and the operator had an opportunity to speak to the revocation. State Board staff was notified members of the hearing and provided a recording as a part of the record. We collected additional information from both the operator and Shelby County on multiple occasions. Particularly, I think, in revocation appeals, it is often the case where we review the information submitted on the first request for information. That brings up additional questions, and there are additional requests for information that are sent to both parties. And then in this case, we had to schedule a special called meeting because, as we discussed, there is a very strict statutory timeline to handle renewal appeals, and it fell outside of the regular State Board meetings. So in advance of the State Board meeting, the State Board members would have received something similar to what you all received. So they would have received the entire record. They would have also received the executive director's recommendation on the appeal in preparation for the discussion at the special called meeting. So let's talk about the facts in this case and how the State Board staff ultimately analyzed the allegations that were presented by Shelby County. So in order to do this, we requested a lot of information. The slide lists at a very high level what that information was. If you took a look at any of the contents of the record, you will see that there were a large number of documents that had to be analyzed by the staff to really determine what was fact and what evidence we had on the record to support or not support the allegations that were and the reasons for revocation. So the first allegation that was made by Shelby County as a reason to revoke was that the governing board was not functioning. And this is ultimately an allegation that the State Board staff was not able to fully substantiate and therefore determined it was not a material violation of the charter agreement. We found that there was certainly not a fully engaged and built out governing board, but the evidence that was provided by both the operator and Shelby County was to a certain extent contradictory, unclear, and when we were really thinking about our charge of, do we have enough evidence to determine that this, in fact, was a material violation of the charter agreement, the staff determined that we simply did not have conclusive evidence to show that it was a non-functioning governing board. Certainly, it was not a robust governing board, and I think you would see in the executive director's recommendation that potentially if there was a more robust and engaged governing board, some of the issues may not have arisen to the place where we were revoking the charter agreement, but this was an allegation that the state board staff was not able to substantiate. The next allegation was as it relates to grades given in a class that was not taught by a licensed instructor. And there were two classes that were named in this issue, geometry and the academic seminar class. And based on the review of the evidence and what we were able to determine is that we did agree with Shelby County that the geometry class was not taught by a licensed instructor. The students in that class did not receive regular instruction. There was kind of a combination of attempts at instruction by the school, both from a virtual option as well as other platforms. But, in totality, the students all received the same grade. The students, many of the teachers in the school reported that there was not consistent instruction happening in the geometry class. And so ultimately, the state board did determine that this allegation was substantiated. There was evidence to show that it was, but it did not substantiate the academic seminar allegation. Again, there was unclear evidence around this particular class. And so you will see in the notes that we were not able to determine that this specific allegation as it relates to the academic seminar was substantiated. The third allegation was around the use of unlicensed teachers. And certainly the state board staff, when we were analyzing this issue and the evidence that was available, recognized that there is a statewide teacher shortage. And so this is not something that, when it comes to staffing, that is easy for any district or any charter school to overcome. But what was most concerning to the state board staff when reviewing this particular allegation and the evidence was the pattern that we saw as it relates to unlicensed teachers. So we saw the school start in its first year and have unlicensed teachers, that it had been notified by Shelby County of the issue and that it was something that came up in the governing board minutes, that's something that they knew was an issue. But this pattern continued and grew into the second year of the school, where in October of 2018, Shelby County notified them that they had 4 individuals that were not licensed. And it is a requirement of state law that if a teacher of record must have an appropriate licensure and endorsement, and if they don't, then a school can apply for certain waivers depending on the class that a teacher is teaching. But when we ask if any waivers have been submitted for these teachers, the operator in the district confirmed that no waivers had been submitted. So the state board staff ultimately determined that this allegation was substantiated. And I think this is to a certain extent, kind of, letting charter schools know that unlicensed teachers are something that authorizers are responsible for monitoring and compliance, and that they will be held to the same standards as traditional public schools as it relates to licensure of their teachers. And then the fourth allegation was around an employee whose background check was not fully cleared by Shelby County and yet was employed by the school. This was another allegation that was not fully substantiated by the state board staff because there was not full documentation on either side that led us to fully be able to say, yes, this was a material violation of the charter agreement. There was conflicting information about whether or not additional information had been collected on this particular employee, whether or not the school had the jurisdiction to employ the employee based on the additional information that they had gathered. And so ultimately, when we are looking at this issue to say, does this rise to the level of a material violation such that it could lead to the revocation of a charter agreement? The state board staff could not substantiate this allegation. But ultimately, there were two allegations that were substantiated, and the recommendation to the State Board of Education from the executive director was that because there were two material violations found as a part of the de novo review by the state board staff, that the recommendation was to revoke the charter agreement and to uphold the decision of Shelby County in this decision. So after a robust discussion by the State Board of Education, ultimately the State Board of Education upheld the revocation decision of Gateway, and the school eventually did close at the end of that school year. So now I'd like to open it up to the Commission to get your thoughts and reactions based on this case study. In particular, I put some discussion questions here for you all to think about, but if you were deciding on this appeal, kind of what questions would you have? What would you want additional information about? Are there things that we as an authorizer need to consider based on the facts in this case that we would want to ensure that we're doing as it relates to monitoring and oversight? So with that, I will happily turn the discussion back over to Chairman Griscom, and happy to answer additional questions as commissioners have it.
This is Tom Griscom. Tess, thank you for the presentation. Very thorough and very informative. Do commissioners have questions for Tess on this presentation about revocation appeals?
Hey, Tom, this is Eddie. I've got just one quick question, and it was brought up when you were discussing the background checks. So help me understand, when we require schools, all across the state, do they run just a state background check, or is it a federal background check that is run on any applicant?
Thank you, Tess Stovall. So the background checks that are run by all employees for public charter schools are the TBI background check, which does run through the federal system, as well as the DCS check and a DHS check. So in this particular case, the issue, what we ran into was there was a change in state law that happened, which shifted the responsibility as it relates to running the TBI background checks from the authorizer and allowed charter operators to run their own background checks. So now charter schools can have an ORI number and can run their own background checks. And so there was a change in state law that happened during this time frame, and Gateway, in their second year of operation, was able to run their own background checks. So there was kind of this overlay of complication that was happening. But as it stands right now, how it works is that charter schools authorized by the Commission are required to run, have their own ORI number and run their own TBI background checks. The Commission still has to run the DCS checks, and so we will require submission of information of employees or potential employees to the Commission. We will run those background checks and let them know from a DCS perspective whether or not those individuals have passed the background check.
Okay. And here's where my question comes in based on where I work now. What I know is a lot of local jurisdictions don't feed into the federal system. They fit into their state systems, but those systems are not interconnected. So, police, in Knox County they get a welfare check on a DCS kid. They do a quick search for that family. Nothing pops up, but yet there's something there in another state because the systems aren't talking to themselves. So I guess my question is, do we need to look at possibly even making sure that as we're running background checks, that it's a requirement, this may be a bigger discussion statewide, that we're also running a background check from the state wherever an applicant may have lived, just to make sure that nothing is falling through the cracks?
This is Tess Stovall. That's a great flag, and I will absolutely bring that up to ensure that we are having the most robust information possible. And I will say, as someone who's looked at a lot of background checks in the last couple of years, there could always be process improvements, and even the information you're analyzing can sometimes be very murky. So I completely hear you, and we'll definitely raise that, particularly when we are talking to the TBI once we are moving and ensuring that our schools have the appropriate access.
Hey, Mr. Chair, this is Alan Levine. May I
yes,
say? In my experience, you can generally predict the success or failure of an entity by virtue of the engagement of the governing body. I mean, when I saw the response to the governing body, they had 8, then it was 5, 3 were really active. I almost didn't even need to look much further. Anything else after that, I presume, is not up to standard. And so, I guess my question is, as staff is looking at these things, I look very, very specifically at the engagement of governance and, what KPIs are being reported up to the board. What are the high risk areas? For instance, the qualification of faculty, making sure everybody's cleared background exams. If I look at an organization and I see that the board isn't engaged and reviewing those things on an ongoing basis, I'm going to presume that whatever else is being alleged is probably true. So that's not as much a question as it is just a statement about how I approach these things. If I see weakness in governance, I'm going to lean pretty hard against the institution. Because to me, there's no excuse to have an organization that has these kinds of commitments to the state and doesn't have an engaged governing body.
This is Tom Griscom. Tess, let me ask you a question. Along the way, are there touch points? So in the example you shared with us, was there information going back to this charter school that identified some of these potential issues and giving them an opportunity to try to, fix them or improve them? To Alan's point, if you knew you had a board that really was not meeting with a quorum, I'm assuming this is not just a one-time, but that there were opportunities along the way for Gateway to be aware of these issues and to have time to correct them. Am I right in assuming that?
This is Tess Stovall. I think based on my memory of the record, the school district had alerted the operator of issues. I think in particular, they were aware of the issues as it relates to teacher licensure and were letting them know that this needed to be corrected. I think that many of the robustness of the governing board issues came out as it relates to the complaint by the employee and the initiated of the investigation. I believe that Shelby County felt like the issues were so egregious that there was limited time to allow a corrective action. But certainly the school participated in the investigation by the authorizer. I was aware that things were, that this investigation was happening, and certainly was given opportunity to respond and correct issues along the way. I think that the authorizer just recognized, I think to Commissioner Levine's point, that some of these issues were just so egregious that it really just had to be a pretty much an immediate revocation.
Thank you. This is Tom Griscom. Do other commissioners have questions for Tess on the revocation appeal training we just had?
Mr. Chair, Dave Hanson.
Oh, go ahead.
Please. No, please, go ahead.
It seems to me from looking at this that there are kind of two different things here, and I want to understand what is the expectation with respect to the LEA being aware of things. The licensure question is pretty cut and dried. You have to report who your teachers and educational leaders are, and the licensure can be checked against known records. to me, the second problem, which was the inadequacy of the instruction and the issuance of grades in the geometry class, is something that I would think would be very difficult for an LEA to catch. Help me understand, as an LEA, what is our responsibility? I mean, part of it goes to Alan's point on having a good governing board, but absent a former employee, I don't know how you catch the geometry problem.
Well, I completely agree, and I think this was something that was brought up as it relates to the discussion with the state board members, is that some of these issues are highly complex. And so unless you are, to a certain extent, I think, in the, really peeling back the layers, you may not have seen that to be an issue. I think that one of the things in our staff reflection when we were thinking about, because I will say the best thing about getting the opportunity to hear appeals is that it allows us to reflect on our own oversight and monitoring and think about, well, would we have caught that? I think what my response to is I'm not sure we would have necessarily caught that if all the grades were the same. What we would have identified was there is no teacher of record that is assigned to this class that meets the requirements as it relates to licensure, or we would have seen Tess Stovall is assigned to 3 classes at the same time, and that physically is not possible. Let's ask some questions about what's going on. And I think this is why, from a state board perspective and then also a commission perspective, having the student information system be housed with the commission, these are conversations that we will be having with our schools, just as it relates to data quality, right? We want to make sure that the right people are assigned to the right classes. So it would have brought up a question of, tell me how is it that Tess Stovall is assigned to 3 different classes? Or, we will be running regular licensure checks, and so we will be determining, hey, you're teaching a geometry class, but you don't have anyone who's licensed for geometry. But I do agree that there are some of these issues that, absent an employee who reported it, they may not be something that on the surface would have identified. But that's why I think it's important for the commission to think about really thoughtful oversight and monitoring. So as it relates to a site visit, are you going in and visiting classes and saying, let me see what's happening in that geometry class? So I think that's a really important part of our oversight and monitoring process as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Hanson, did you have a question?
I did. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tess, I guess I was just wondering, is it common in these types of situations to have such difficulty confirming what I would call fairly, maybe not straightforward or black and white, but I guess you asked what surprised me. I guess I was surprised that in 2 of the things, it was difficult to actually ascertain, like, was this functioning, was this there, did the school district receive the black and white request? So I guess I'm curious, like in the number of appeals or situations like this you've seen, is it fairly common where we kind of have to make very difficult decisions based on fairly imperfect, opaque information?
This is Tess Stovall, and I think you summarized it exactly right, Commissioner Hanson. I think that is something that certainly I have faced, particularly when it comes to revocation appeals, is that a district is basing its decision on a set of allegations, and that when we come in, we really are saying, okay, school district, provide us everything you have as it relates to, allegation A. Operator, this is your opportunity to provide us everything you have as it relates to allegation A. And then we as staff are really piecing together, okay, district said this, do we have evidence to support this? How are they where are they laying the breadcrumbs? Okay, operator, now they're saying this, like, how do we piece this together? And so that's why I think in particular, we see more additional requests for information around revocation appeals, because once we get that first load of information and we dive in, it pulls up additional questions that we want to go back and ask. And I think from a staff perspective, we want to be able to very definitively say there was clear evidence, we were able to substantiate it, the operator was given an opportunity to respond, and they didn't. And so here's the black and white. I do think that we have very frequently seen times where we are just simply not able to say, I can absolutely confirm that there was a material violation that happened. And so that's why I think these decisions in particular are very challenging. And I didn't go to law school, but I feel like these appeals make me sometimes wish I had gone to law school because of the amount of documents and things that we're piecing together to really bring you all, I think, a recommendation that we feel is based on fact, based on the record, and based on what all the information we were able to collect.
Hanson, this is Ashley Thomas. Just to kind of reiterate what Tess was speaking on, revocation is a huge decision, and the commission is charged with determining if the district was correct in making that decision. And so in Tess's recommendations, she has tried to evaluate everything and tried to gather as much information, and we don't want to be in a situation where because something was missed, we determined something to be material, and we've decided to revoke a school or uphold that revocation. And so while the standard is not necessarily beyond a reasonable doubt, we want to provide enough evidence and make a recommendation that would sort of support that standard.
Thank you both for the color and the context.
Mr. Chair and Tess.
Yes, Commissioner.
So, and we don't have all of the details on this, so I'm going to ask a question that may seem evident once you explain it. When they looked at the classroom that did not have a teacher that was licensed, did everyone go back and look to see, did the school year begin with a licensed teacher that then left that had a substitute that was unlicensed, which went longer than the 30 days, which they're not allowed to do because you have to have a licensed teacher, you know, if there's going to be an absence of a teacher for 30 days. Was all of that taken into account when looking at this to see, did the charter school start in compliance, fall out of it, and was unable to get back into compliance when the decision came in that they had broken their charter agreement?
This is Tess Stovall, absolutely. And that was a part of piecing together the puzzle, is to really figure out, okay, what did their staffing start with? Where did things, when did they lose a teacher? How did they replace the teacher? And so one of the requests that we made was, you know, provide us your staffing list for both 2017 and 18 and also 2018 and 19 by employment date, so that we were really able to piece together, okay, this is when they lost their licensed teacher. This is when they employed a substitute who was not appropriately licensed. This is how long the substitute served. So absolutely, that was a part of the process, because I think we wanted to acknowledge that, you know, they did start out fully employed or fully, you know, staffed, appropriately licensed. They lost teachers, but they were never able to replace teachers with the appropriate licensure. And then that issue compounded itself into the next school year. And I think, I think both the state board and the state board staff recognize that teacher licensure, there is a real teacher shortage. We get that. But there are some things that, from a state law perspective, there's just not wiggle room. And, I get that there are struggles, but I think that the pattern of behavior that we were seeing that carried into the second school year was the most concerning part of it.
All right. Now, back up. That's what the state board did. Did the state board come to the realization that Shelby County had engaged in that same process of investigation on what the school, that entire timeline? Because, I think it's important that when we're looking at it, did the county go to their extreme ends, in whether or not to decide to uphold or overturn? So I'm kind of just trying to back up, like, how deep did the investigation go from Shelby County and their initial recommendation, and then the investigation that the state board engaged in to either uphold or overturn it, in which you all upheld their decision?
This is Tess Stovall. They definitely conducted a pretty thorough investigation once they were notified of the issues. We were submitted a lot of documentation from Shelby County. I don't know if they went into the amount of detail specifically as it relates to the teacher licensure issue, although I know that we did receive parts of the record that showed that they were investigating emails back and forth about who, were any waivers applied for? Can you tell me the licensure on these issues? I do think that's something that the state board has struggled with, and I would imagine that the commission will struggle with as well, is whether or not the process was followed versus what the facts show. So, I think that this appeal, isn't as great of an example as other appeals that I have seen where the district may not have followed the process that the state board would have followed, or even the commission may have followed in the future, but the facts were still the facts, and there was support to revoke the charter or non-renew the charter. And so I think the state board members really wrestled with how do we weigh these two things as it relates to our standard of review, and how do we take into account process versus what the facts are. And so I do think that is something that you all as commissioners may see in the future, because, we weren't necessarily a party to the investigation. We are just coming in on the back end and trying to piece all of this together. And so thinking about, how do we really take that standard of review, take the record, and try to make the best decision as possible, knowing that, we're coming in the ninth inning and expected to kind of pull it all together when we haven't been a part of the process up until that point.
This is Tom Griscom. Do other commissioners have questions for Tess? Seeing none, Tess, thank you. So our next item on the agenda is Allie Gaffey, who is the Interim Director of Charter Schools for the State Board of Education, is going to give us an overview of charter school authorizer evaluations, as our work as an authorizer will be evaluated by the state board in the future. So, Allie, welcome. Before you begin, may I ask you to please state your name and your position for the record, and then we are interested in your presentation. Thanks for being with us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Allie Gaffey, Interim Director of Charter Schools for the State Board. And today I am going to be speaking with you about our authorizer evaluation work. Give me one moment. Let me just make sure that everything is set up for viewing. Thank you, Chase, for giving me the presentation right. Okay. Can everyone see the presentation? Sorry, I can't see everyone, so if someone nodded.
We can see it.
Okay. Thank you. All right, great. So on our agenda today, I'm going to cover the following topics. Going to kick us off with a brief history of how we came to be evaluating authorizers, an overview of our evaluation process, outcomes from our fall 2020 pilot, and then, of course, allow time for any questions that you may have. So to start, I'll briefly walk us through the changes to charter law in recent years that led to the state board evaluating authorizer compliance and quality. So within the last 3 years in particular, we've really seen several changes to the state's charter law in alignment with a focus on quality. And this has been the intention behind these changes. So first, in 2017, the law was amended to require the state board to adopt quality authorizing standards, and they were developed based on national best practices. In 2018, the law was amended again to allow authorizers to collect an authorizer fee. And then in 2019, the law was amended further to create UAL, the Public Charter School Commission, and to charge the state board with evaluating authorizers. And so all of these changes have really kept the true goal at the center, in that if we focus on increasing authorizer quality, we will ultimately be improving the quality and increase educational opportunities for our students. So as stated in the previous slide, the charter law was amended in 2019 to charge the state board with ensuring the effective operation of authorizers and evaluating authorizer quality through periodic evaluations. So any authorizer that fails to remedy noncompliance that's found through the evaluation may receive a reduction in its authorizer fees. And the evaluation includes all 6 of the state's charter school authorizers, so Metro Nashville Public Schools, Shelby County Schools, Knox County Schools, Hamilton County Schools, Achievement School District, and the Tennessee Public Charter School Commission. So all of these authorizers will be evaluated at a minimum every 2 years. The State Board developed its evaluation process through a partnership with an education consulting agency named Schoolworks, and involved authorizer representatives, charter school operators, and charter school support organizations in the development process. Tennessee is now the 4th state to implement an authorizer evaluation system, so Ohio, Minnesota, and Missouri being the other 3. And our team met with representatives from these states as well to learn from their successes and challenges. After several months of surveys, focus groups, meetings, working groups, we developed our evaluation process with a plan to host a pilot evaluation as our first test drive, if you will. So we'll walk us through the process at a high level and then move into discussion of the pilot evaluation. The evaluation process consists of the following key elements. First being that it occurs every 2 years with a cohort of 3 authorizers, and I'll reveal those cohorts momentarily. They're based on the authorizer's alignment to the State Board's quality charter authorizing standards, which are based on a combination of national best practices as well as alignment to our state law and State Board role. The evaluations are facilitated by State Board staff and external evaluators. So we determined this is a really critical part of our evaluation system and really felt it was important to include multiple perspectives and expertise in the process. And at the end of the evaluation week, authorizers receive preliminary scores and an opportunity to review the evaluation report for factual corrections prior to public release. Additionally, the evaluation reports are shared publicly via the State Board's website and presented to the State Board annually at its February meeting. And then during a non-evaluation year, authorizers complete a self-assessment and any corrective action plans if required due to the results of their most recent evaluation. Our team created an evaluation rubric, which is based on the authorizing standards and encompasses these main authorizing responsibilities or buckets. The first one, agency commitment and capacity. Second, application process and decision making. The third, performance contracting. Fourth, ongoing oversight and evaluation. Fifth, revocation and renewal decision making. And then sixth is some advanced standards, which we opted as bonus points. The evaluation team considers a specific evidence base and evaluates it against the rubric. And the evidence base includes 3 key components: the authorizer's documentation, an interview with school leaders, and an interview with the authorizing staff. I'll also add that should an authorizer have gone through any appeal cycle within their 2-year review term, the recommendation report and the final decision would also be included as part of the evidence base and an evaluation. The evaluation culminates with a final report, and the report includes standard scores, specific evaluative comments, an overall rating, and any required follow-up actions. The evaluative comments are included to provide the authorizer with a description of what documentation was used as evidence within each standard. And in terms of follow-up actions, only those authorizers who receive one of the bottom 2 scores, either approaching satisfactory or unsatisfactory incomplete, will be required to complete a corrective action plan and timeline. So as you can see on the slide, the score ranges for these ratings are still in process. Determining these score ranges is one of the intended outcomes of the pilot and what our team is currently working on finalizing now. So the final score ranges will be shared when the pilot evaluation reports are published in early January. As I previewed earlier, the state's 6 charter school authorizers are split into 2 cohorts, with the first cohort beginning its first formal evaluation next fall. And then you'll see the commission is included in cohort 2 and will have their first formal evaluation in fall of 22. These cohorts will not change and were determined based on the Achievement School District and Metro Nashville's willingness to participate in the fall pilot. So in terms of timeline, the evaluation cycle runs for 2 years and includes the components you see depicted here. With cohort 1 being represented in purple and then cohort 2 in blue, you can see how the cycle would flow for authorizers. with an official kickoff in August for cohort 1, as they would undergo an authorizer or participate in an authorizer orientation, and then be followed by document submission window, evaluations, and sharing of evaluation outcomes at the State Board's quarterly February meeting. And in this meeting, this is also where we will have an annual state of authorizing, which will include a bigger picture of how we are progressing as a state. And then around that same time is when cohort 2 really begins their cycle with a self-evaluation at the start of the year ahead of their orientation in August. And from there, the cycle repeats itself, and the tasks for each authorizer may vary slightly depending on the outcomes of their evaluation. So you see this noted with the asterisk across the months of March through July. If an authorizer has any corrective action items that they're responsible for, this would be the time that they're working on that, as well as updating documentation ahead of their next evaluation. So next I'll share briefly the outcomes of the fall 2020 pilot, and then happy to answer any questions that you have. The pilot evaluation began this past August and is currently in its final stages ahead of the conclusion at the State Board's February meeting. The pilot centered around these key elements. All authorizers were invited to voluntarily participate for the benefit of receiving informal feedback on their authorizing processes and practices, as well as the delay of a formal evaluation until 2022. And we're really grateful for Metro Nashville and the ASD for opting in. Additionally, we invited authorizing staff to serve as evaluators for the benefit of a deeper knowledge of the evaluation process, and will continue to do so as part of formal evaluations beginning in 21. And so for this year's pilot, Shelby County, Metro Nashville, and your executive director volunteered to participate. The pilot followed the full evaluation process and was an opportunity for the State Board and our authorizers to gain valuable feedback and to further refine processes. And the results of the pilot serve as a baseline to gauge thresholds for overall ratings in our subsequent evaluations, as well as determine areas of strength and challenges across some of our authorizers. So this knowledge in particular really helps us to determine topics for additional technical support that we'll be providing and available to all authorizers beginning in mid-2021. In terms of our lessons learned, there are 5 key points that I think are important to share with you today. The first being that the evaluation is an iterative process. When we started building the evaluation process, it felt incredibly daunting. As we reviewed the current authorizer evaluation processes of the other states, we found their processes to be thorough and specific, both of which we were far from at that initial point. But as we began to work through developing our process and setting up the pilot, we realized that the process is an iterative process, and this is by design. With each evaluation cycle, we'll continue to refine and collectively improve, and we believe that as a result of the evaluations, our authorizers will continue to grow toward the high bar set in our standards, and therefore simultaneously improve the quality of our charter schools. So as an authorizer, it's important for you to know that if you're following through the process, your evaluation outcomes should improve over time, as well as the impact that it has or overall performance of the charter schools. The evaluations are intensive and important. So I think the director of schools for the ASD said it best when she told me that participating in the pilot was exactly this, intense and important. The quality charter authorizing standards are comprised of 24 standards, and there are multiple pieces of evidence that may be submitted to demonstrate alignment for each. And so this document selection is largely left up to the authorizer with limited guidance from us. And so as an authorizer, you'll want to start planning for your evaluation now. Everything that's created and shared may be useful and should be organized and saved well in advance. And you all are in a really unique position because you're currently creating your policies and procedures. So I would recommend using the standards to ensure that what you're developing meets the required criteria and quality. Secondly, get started early. The evaluation tools are on our website now and can be used to plan ahead so that when the submission window opens on September 1 of your evaluation year, it's not the first time anyone has thought about this work. The goal really is that the standards serve as a guide for all authorizing work all the time, not just during an evaluation. The fourth lesson is documentation is king. as an authorizer's documentation is the most important evidence base of an evaluation. The process itself, it also includes an interview with the school leader and a debrief with the authorizing staff, but this verbal evidence has little impact over the score if there is no documentation to support it. So without documentation, the verbal evidence really holds little weight. Our fourth lesson is the process works. While we had a small sample size of 2 for this pilot, we have seen that the process works. The outcomes of the pilot demonstrate that our standards allow us to focus on true strengths in areas of concern for authorizers and will result in valuable improvements. Similar to the second lesson learned, the process is important, and we're really excited about what we've built and ready to execute the formal evaluations next fall. And finally, authorizers, charter schools, and ultimately our students will positively benefit from this work. The goal is and always has been continuous improvement for the purpose of increasing quality educational opportunities for students. And we've seen evidence of a positive correlation that exists between evaluations and student achievement across the other 3 states that are doing this work. And I'm really confident that as our authorizers improve in quality, student achievement will improve as well. And so with that, I will stop sharing my screen and happy to answer any questions that you may have.
This is Tom Griscom. Allie, I've got 2 quick questions. Number 1, have you shared what you've learned in the pilot with both Hamilton County and Knox County so they've at least benefited from what you learned in the pilot?
Not yet. That's a great suggestion. That is my plan. You all are my first stop, and I'm planning on presenting this information to all the authorizers.
Great, thank you. Second question. These are public documents, so when you finish this, do you share them directly with the administration, with the legislature? Do you push them out someplace, or do you wait for people to ask to see these evaluations?
Do you mean the evaluation reports or all the documentation that authorizers submitted?
Whatever you want to pick, because I assume everything you're doing is public. I'm asking because for those of us as commissioners who are confirmed, or when we have a sunset hearing, is this going to be material that we ought to anticipate that a legislator, for example, has had a chance to review?
Gotcha. The evaluation reports themselves will be published on our website, so that is how they are shared publicly. The authorizer documentation that we collect is, of course, public record as well, but we're not posting that, making that available. We're happy to share it as requested. And also one of the intentions behind the evaluations is to allow authorizers to really connect with one another and share some of their resources or documents that they've created as well. So that is one of the intentions, is to share it.
Thank you. One quick follow. So if we go back for sunset hearing, which we are in 2021, will these pilots be available so we should at least be aware of what's in that if we got asked in a sunset hearing about this process?
Yes. So all of our process documents are currently on our website right now. And then the evaluation reports for ASD and Metro Nashville will be published by January 8th on our website.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your answers. So let me open it up to other commissioners who have questions for Allie.
Hey, Allie, it's Wendy Tucker. Thank you for your presentation. I was rolling off the state board right when this work was starting, and it was, I was really excited about it. So I'm thrilled to see how far you guys have taken it. One of the questions I had back then that I have now, that, isn't, I guess, the most positive approach, but just like in the spirit of hope for the best, prepare for the worst, what happens if authorizers are in those bottom 2 categories? I know there's a corrective action plan and they have time, but what's the lever to make sure that that corrective action happens, and that, and that they do improve whatever those practices are that are concerning?
Sure. So depending on the outcome, the 2 different scores, approaching satisfactory and then unsatisfactory, have 2 different kind of tracks, if you will. So both of them are required to complete a corrective action plan. The approaching satisfactory would have a year to implement and to fully satisfy all the items and timelines on their plan. Whereas if they score an unsatisfactory, they would have about 8 months. They have a shorter timeline because they are expected to participate in an evaluation again immediately following their previous evaluation. So actually, if you think about it, they would complete 3 evaluations back to back because their cohort doesn't change. And so if after a corrective action plan is submitted, completed, all the tasks are checked off at either the 8 months or the year mark, then we will be monitoring them to see that they're improving. If they're not improving, then they could be at risk for having up to 50% of their authorizer fee withheld. And that would be a recommendation that we would make to the state board based on the outcomes of their corrective action plan.
And this is Wendy Tucker again. So that up to 50%, is that a state board policy? And a statute just allowed the state board to leverage that. So is that a state board policy? It was decided that you would max it at 50%. And then is that like a state board vote? Is that a lot like charter approval where there's a recommendation from Sarah and then the board votes on whether to do that or not? Just trying to figure out process.
Yeah, so the up to 50% is currently in our rule. And so that rule is going to be on final reading in front of the board this February. And then, of course, will be effective ahead of the evaluation starting in the fall. And so with that, yes, we would, if we came to a situation where we needed to make that recommendation, Sarah would recommend an amount depending on the situation, and the board would vote on that. Exactly.
Great, thank you.
Tom Griscom. Other commissioners have questions for Allie? Allie, I see. So let me thank you for your time with us today, for sharing this information, seeing that we are one of the pilots that participated and where we are. Thank you for giving us a little bit of time before we actually have to fill out all of this so we get up and going. But thank you very much for the presentation today.
Thanks for having me.
We are at the end of the agenda, so I want to make a couple of quick comments and then open it up if other commissioners have something they would like to share before we take that awaited for action of adjourning. Let me again, where I started this meeting, this is Tom Griscom, thank Judy Spencer for all of her work, support. As the chairman, I will share with the rest of the commissioners, I cannot tell you all how many times Judy helped me working through some of these issues. And if you think what we've done in 2020, we had a lot of areas that we had to sort of scrape us through and sort of figure out. Judy, I can't thank you enough and wish you only the best as you continue your work for the State Department of Education. So thank you so much on behalf of myself and all the commissioners. Let me also again welcome Ashley Thomas, glad to have you as our general counsel, and Chase Engel, who is here as our director of external affairs, external relations. And Chase, you ran a pretty good meeting for us today, so thank you. You called the roll quite well. I felt like I was in a legislative hearing, so clearly you have done this in the past. Let me also just thank all the commissioners. This has been a challenging year for all of us. We have our own lives, but we also have been in the process of setting up a public charter commission for the state of Tennessee. As you all know, we've had fits and starts, so I appreciate everybody's willingness to stay with us, to work through this, to be very diligent in getting us where we are with a great executive director, Tess Stovall. And I think as we head out of 2020, we can see a great path ahead going into 2021. So as your chairman, I can't thank all of you enough for your patience and your perseverance. It really has been very helpful as in trying to sort of work through this. So thank you all. I wish each of you a healthy and happy holiday season. And we're all looking forward to the new year in 2021.
Amen.
So with that, if anybody else has any comments, I'll open it up. And so the next comment is going to be to ask for a motion to adjourn.
This is Commissioner Richards, and I'd just like to ask Chase to have the record reflect that I voted aye on the approval of the policies. I was muted at the time and switching between phone and meeting, so if you could reflect my aye vote, I would be appreciative. Thank you.
So I've been recorded.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments?
I just want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas as well. It's been a pleasure this year. It's been an interesting year. We got to meet all together for one meeting, and we've all looked at a 2D image of each other since then. So, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and if y'all are like me, I'm skipping ahead to 2031 because 100 years ago the 20s weren't that great, and I want to go ahead and skip this one.
Thank you, Commissioner Smith. Any other comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Levine, so moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner. Chase, this is probably the most noteworthy roll call you'll do today. So would you call the roll, please?
You got it, Chairman. Commissioner Hanson?
Aye.
Votes aye. Commissioner Levine? Votes aye. Commissioner Patterson?
Yes.
Votes aye. Commissioner Richards? Votes aye. Commissioner Cisnet?
Aye.
Votes aye. Commissioner Smith?
Yes, aye.
Votes aye. Commissioner Tucker? Votes aye. Chairman Griscom? Votes aye. Chairman, you have 8 commissioners voting aye.
Thank you all. Happy holidays. See you in the new year.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.